There we go. Welcome everybody to another episode of the Puget Systems Podcast. I'm really excited for this one. As I'm usually pretty excited to do the podcast in general, but this is a pretty cool one. I may mispronounce Aharon, right?
Yeah, I'm hearing your voice twice though.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's like you're playing your voice back a minute later. Like,
we just had everything working just a second ago.
Yeah.
Why is that?
There's like a delay, at least for me. Now it just seems like the audio might be off. All right.
Did you have a second?
You know, what do we do?
This is what happens when we do live content.
Yeah, I mean, we were good a minute ago.
Yeah. Is there a second tab open maybe for StreamYard?
It's not. I don't think it's coming from me, but I'll check.
Oh, maybe.
I'm closing everything else except this thing. Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Is that better?
Yeah.
We good?
I sounds good. I don't hear anything else.
Okay. Cool.
Oh, you know, I might have had the YouTube tab. That's why.
The delay a bit. Yeah.
Got it. All right.
Awesome. All right. Well, so welcome everybody to the Puget Systems Podcast. Joined by Aharon Rabinowitz. We're going to be talking about a short film, Metal Heart, Fists of Steel, which is very cool. This is very fun. I always like to, before we really get started, I always like to have the guests this way introduce themselves, give us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Cool. My name is Aharon Rabinowitz. I'm currently the VP of Marketing at School of Motion, but I have a long history in animation and visual effects. I've been in this industry for 25 years. I worked at Red Giant for 11 years, and then we were acquired by Maxon, and I worked there for a bit, and then I did some consulting, and then one of my clients was School of Motion, and it was just like the perfect fit, and it was so great, like everything that I love about educating people on animation and visual effects, that that felt right. I mean, I've worked on television productions, and I've worked on animated stuff, live and like all this stuff. Like I have a long history, and I love what I've been able to do. But always behind it, whether I was working on a Nickelodeon show or something like that, I was always doing tutorials. Like I would learn something at work, and then I would go and record it and make a tutorial about it. And then that's what I enjoyed most over the years, is sharing knowledge and information.
Oh, that's rad. That's pretty cool. You worked at Nickelodeon. I have a few notes on the side, so I'm going to look off to the side quite a bit. Yeah, I guess like from Sesame Street, MTV, VH1, Nickelodeon. That's quite the storied background. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. In New York, it's kind of a thing because, there's so much production that comes out of the MTV network. So a lot of motion graphics artists end up working like through that at some point in their career. Not always, but, a lot of people that I meet have at least at some point spent some time, whether it was on MTV, Nickelodeon, VH1, any of those things, but there's so many networks that they have that sooner or later, if you're moving into it, it's like actors and Law and Order, right? In New York,
sure.
Right? If you're an actor in New York, you're probably going to do eventually Law and Order, and that's our Law and Order for motion designers in New York.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So I guess we'll go rewind the tape way back to the beginning. Pretty general question, but how did you get started in that? Like, where did it all begin for you?
I mean, so I've known since I was like 4 years old that I wanted to be a visual effects artist, at least as a part of the things I did. I saw Star Wars in the theaters in '77. I was 3 years old, and I didn't quite understand everything that I was seeing. I remember I do remember it. I have like flashes of memory from that time, and then I do remember that 6 months after the movie came out, while it was still playing in the theater, because back then movies would play for a year if they were really good.
Sure.
I saw on TV they had a behind the scenes of the visual effects of Star Wars. It's a 45-minute thing. You can find it on YouTube.
Wow.
And R2-D2 and C-3PO host it, and they explain how visual effects work. Or back then they were called special effects. And I just was like so fascinated by it, and I was like obsessed with that ever since I was a little kid. So even when we were making like videos with video cameras, we try to like blow things up and do all sorts of cool effects. And but then my life path, there wasn't really like a great way for me to kind of access that and like make that a career. I studied psych in college, and I actually worked in a psych ward for my last year every Friday, and that cured me of wanting to work in psychology pretty hard. Not because I didn't like helping people, but because it was painful. It was hard to work, to like every day come in like once a week. I spent a lot of time thinking about these people too, and this was like long-term care, so it was difficult. And someone I knew was working at Sesame Street, and I just asked if I could speak to a producer there just to like learn about what they do. And he connected me with a producer there, and we had I think we had set the call for 30 minutes, and it was a great conversation. She really helped me understand like what that career looks like. And when my 30 minutes were up, I actually said to her, I'm like, oh, I'm looking at the time, my time's up. So I'm going to say thank you very much. And I really appreciate it. And she was so appreciative of the fact that I was conscious of her time and like how important that was, that she was like, no one's ever actually stopped me when, like on time and things like that. So she said, if you're interested in anything here, let me know. And I'll look and see what's possible. And another 6 months went by. I was trying to figure myself out. And I reached out again. I said, look, I'm still trying to figure out my first steps into this industry. And she said, well, it just so happens that an intern had to leave due to family obligations. Someone was sick, and we can't get another intern because these are given for college credits generally, and we're already half a semester in. So for half a semester, I came in and I was an intern there, and then I did another half a year as an intern, and then after that, I started working there, as like a PA, and then like doing other small jobs there within all the departments that were there, and eventually I took a little break. I was setting up arts programs in public schools in New York City with another company called Young Audiences, and then the right role for me opened up. It was working with the interactive department. They made video games and other stuff. And they also did animation for the show occasionally. And it was like as a technical manager, I didn't have any animation experience at this point.
Okay.
But as a technical manager, I was able to support them. I knew a lot about tech and computers and all of that. And I used that time while I was there, since I was supporting all these animators making stuff for the show and for the games. I had to learn things like After Effects and back then it was 3D Studio Max and Maya. And so I was learning all of these things as I was helping the artists, making sure their stuff worked. And that's kind of led me into doing animation for the show. And that's what launched my animation career, essentially.
Cool. Wow. It's very neat how life will kind of guide your path in a way. It doesn't always go the way that you think. And
I would say that, I actually it's really cool because I did, because I think that I did all these other things. I was a producer so I did the animation at Sesame Street. Then what happened was I got a producer role at Viacom at MTV Networks, and I needed an animator for a project, and my budget was too small. So I rented a computer from Nickelodeon. I just said, hey, I want to use one of your bays. And I was in there animating, and the producer for the animation studio saw my work and said, man, you should send us your reel. Like, you should come in. I'd love to have you work here. And the funny thing was, I was like, yeah, well, I sent you my reel 3 times in the last 6 months. He says, here, come with me. And he takes me to this room where there's, like, no joke, a pile of videotapes that looks like a mountain,
Oh, man.
And he's like, just find your tape and we can watch it now. And we can say, I was like, yeah, how about I just bring it in tomorrow, And that's what I did. And that's how I made that. I kind of was like, up until that point, I was doing all these different things. And so from then on, I was really focused on animation, visual effects. But up until that point, I led a team at Nickelodeon. Actually, it was a child company of Nickelodeon called Noggin, right, which is a child company of Nickelodeon and Sesame Street at the time. And so that experience as a producer for my own stuff, my own team, and all the other things that I did before I became an animator, that helped me to also lead teams later, in projects. And that was also really important. And, when I came to Red Giant, I ran a team of like 6 people who were involved in marketing, but that really was a lot of short filmmaking and, like a lot of cool stuff, tutorials, things like that. So all of that stuff, like, you say that your direction, that you never know it, absolutely true. And it's often those weird, like, journeys, those side quests that end up giving you the experience you need to be successful in the thing you want to be.
Absolutely. I'm a big, I spent a lot of my 20s doing completely non-tech stuff. I knew I would always end up doing something related to tech, but I deliberately tried different things just to either. I didn't really have kind of a point at it for it at the time, but yeah, all those weird different experiences helped to inform and educate better skills and flexibility with like you said, leading a team and things like that. Yeah, I think that's really important to try things that are completely different from what you're most passionate about, just to really get a different perspective of things.
Yeah. It's funny, but I had a mentor in my early days at Red Giant, one of the two owners, and he said to me that at a company full of artists like this, he goes, 90% of my job is personality management, right? It's not it's not about the short day-to-day stuff that has to get done, but he's like, you have all these creative people, very strong ideas about stuff, and it's how do you get these people to work together in a way that actually produces results that are like cohesive, right? As opposed to everybody trying to do their own thing. And, again, for me, that was like, in part, I already had that experience as a producer. So, it made sense when I started leading the team there. Like, it was easy to sort of slip into that because essentially, I think the big challenge a lot of artists have when they make those moves into more leadership roles is that they're not doing as much creative work as other people on their team. And they have it's not that it's not good work, but they feel like they're missing something in their lives. See, me, the way I kind of look at it is like, if I help them to do their best work, then I'm part of the creative process, and then I get to enjoy that success. And of course, on the side, I'm always doing my little things like the short film that we're here to talk about today. And I was always doing little things on the side just to keep myself up to date on software and, constantly learning things. And that's, again, as much as I like teaching, I also like learning. So there's a lot of that too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned the short film, because I know we could totally get off sidetrack. I have other questions related to industry stuff, but I do want to touch on the short film because that's part of what we're here for. DePoets, I'll get to your question in just a sec. So you have a background more in VFX and motion graphics. And I remember, I'll post a link to the School of Motion page that has your short film and the behind the scenes part too. Oops. Okay, yeah. First, I guess, why did you want to jump into Unreal?
So I always had these stories in my head that I wanted to tell. And so actually why I got into, why I wanted to do animation and visual effects to begin with, which is hard to always get to do your own things, right? Like, if you're an animator, motion designer, it's very rare you're going to work on your own project. And in fact, you're probably going to be working on stuff you don't love a lot of that time. I mean, how many toothpaste commercials can you do before you're not excited about it anymore? But we all do those things, but and we have our little passion projects on the side, but they're, because of the amount of people it takes to do generally big projects, like things that have real impact, it's very hard to get anything done that's really truly meaningful, right? Every once in a while you spend a year working on something that comes out. What I found was, when I started looking at Unreal, I just found that I could see these big environments. So something I was always fascinated by, these large worlds that you could build and move around almost in real time and do things, for video games for real time, but for the level of quality that I would need to work at as an artist, it's maybe not real time, but close enough, and Unreal, I wanted to do it for a long time, but all the training that was out there was for video game training, right? So I tried it twice, and I was like, okay, this is just I'm not interested in learning how to build levels and games and all this stuff and the interactions. But then Jonathan Winbush started making training for School of Motion, and I watched their Unreal training, and that got me over the hump. And once I was there, I was like, oh my God, the world is my oyster, really, truly. There's all this free stuff that you can use to make environments, and then there's an Unreal marketplace with tons of content. I mean, all through my early times in learning 3D, I started with Poser and Bryce, and there were all these little marketplaces you could buy stuff at. But ultimately, this was I have a marketplace with really professional assets, but also a place to use them where I can quickly get results. And so I started thinking about what could I do? What kind of stories could I tell? And then I was like, all right, let's try this. I had this funny one in my head for a little while. Let me just see if I can make this happen. And I almost did it accidentally. It started with one shot. I was like, okay, well, that was probably the second hardest shot in this entire film. So if I could do that, then I could do everything else. And then it was just, getting it done. So
cool.
Yeah.
That's neat. Was it a difficult transition?
It was until I took that Unreal course. I could not wrap my head around Unreal. It is not like other 3D programs. You know, I'd say the hardest thing to handle, it's funny, is that Unreal, it's made for video games, right? So every time you bring a file into Unreal, instead of it just referencing that, like if I'm in Cinema 4D and I've got a texture and I call to it from outside, it stays outside. But for Unreal, because it has to be self-contained, everything you bring in has to go into the project. So your projects bloat very quickly. And I realized very quickly I was going to need like a huge hard drive to start doing this stuff. Unlike the stuff I was doing in Cinema 4D, which again, like I loved, I've done a lot of stuff there too. But the transition, there was that, and also the fact that like the tools are really designed for people making games. That said, in the latest version of Unreal 5.4, they introduced a whole bunch of new tools for people doing motion design, and they're also really helpful for animators as a whole. And it's really starting. The people there are aiming what they're doing towards people like me, so that even though I learned the more roundabout ways of doing things in Unreal that were harder because they were made for video games, this is a lot easier, and I'm definitely appreciative of that.
That's cool. Yeah, I've heard from different cons and stuff from the people at Epic that they're really excited about how people are using Unreal for like virtual production and things like that, and it's really nice for them to be picking up and kind of adjusting things to make it easier for that sort of workflow. For sure. I want to grab the poet's question here from YouTube. He said, "Hello, Aharon, what camera was primarily used for the film?" And I'm curious about that myself because it seems like a lot of it was done, I think, for Metal Heart. Yeah,
so I mean, I used the standard camera in Unreal. I just my secret is this: I always keep the camera in motion, right? So I aim at a thing and I have the camera rotating or moving. But then I also render at a larger resolution. I bring that into After Effects and I add more camera shake in post. So even when the camera stops moving, there's still this sort of like, so it always feels like it's in motion. And that was, like shaky cam. And it makes a huge difference in telling the story that I want to tell. I want it to always feel like it was moving. And that's, that's kind of like one of the things that I think about like this. The camera is the other character in the story that you don't see, right? There's somebody holding it. I try to treat the camera like it's an actual real camera. Sometimes it's on a crane, but mostly it's being held by somebody on their shoulder. And if they're chasing an actor who's running, then that camera needs to shake too. And so Unreal doesn't have a great system for this. You can use actually some of the motion design tools to simulate it, but I find that the 2D camera shake after the fact is much easier to manage. And also I think it looks a little bit better. So, that's just my personal approach to it. Right. And I cover it in depth in the behind the scenes. So if you want to see that, but that's it.
So before we go any further, I would take 2.5 minutes to show the thing, and then because I think since you're referencing some of the bits and pieces of it, it might help with the answer a little better. So we're going to throw this up here. Fingers crossed it works.
Unit 18, be advised we're getting high energy readings in your area at Station 46.
46? That hasn't been used since contact. We thinking kaiju?
Either that, or someone just plugged in a really big hairdryer.
Well, here's hoping, Command. I'm on site. Goddard?
Online and ready to go.
Okay, let's do some kaiju recon.
You got it, boss. Initiating virtual link now.
All right, buddy. Connected. Keep your eyes peeled.
Well, technically, I've only got the one eye, and it is always open. But you know me, boss. Careful is my middle name. Oh, okay, that was close. You did back up my data core, right?
Huh. I honestly can't remember.
Hilarious. No one ever worries about the drone. Well, this place is bleak. So, what exactly am I looking for?
Not sure, but we'll know it when we see it.
Well, so far all I see is junk. Oh, wait, there's something. Nope, sorry, still junk. If you want my opinion, there's no kaiju around here. I mean, well, shit.
Goddard! Damn it! Command, kaiju is confirmed, and I think we made it angry. I'm going in.
Roger that. Support is inbound. In the meantime, see if there's anything you can do to slow it down.
I'll do what I can, Command. Whoa, he's a big boy. You might want to put a rush on this.
Almost there. Hang tight.
I've got a clear shot, and I'm gonna take it. Firing now.
Detonation detected. Report.
Oh, you have got to be kidding me. Command, we're gonna need a bigger gun.
Look up.
What the?
Relax, soldier. The cavalry has arrived.
Command, is that you?
In the flesh. I mean, plus this new metal bodysuit. Now, let's take care of your reptile dysfunction.
Seriously?
I have no regrets. back to business. It's on!
That's so cool. I like that a lot. That's fun. Oh man. Okay, so I think that would help a little bit, add a little more to the answer to the previous question there. That's so fun. Did David Hewlett voice the robot?
Yes, David Hewlett voiced the robot. David Hewlett, some of you guys may know him from Stargate Atlantis. He was on the show C. He was in The Shape of Water and
Cube.
Yeah, Cube's is like his early days, as you know. He has, he's been around for a long time. He's a great guy. He and I worked together a couple of times, and we're best friends. And like I as soon as I had to play this robot that was supposed to be both lovable and also like kind of annoying, I was like, I know the guy, right? Plus, also he's gonna die, and that's kind of what David's thing is. Eventually, he dies in almost everything he's in. So
Oh, that's fun.
And the voice, the mech, and the voice, the command is played by Marta Svatek, who she plays now. She just released Vise is a character in Valorant. It's the new character in Valorant. She plays Roxy Wolf and the main character Gregory in Five Nights at Freddy's, the most recent Five Nights at Freddy's. She's done a lot of stuff. So Marta and I also we worked together at Red Giant. We've worked together at a couple companies. Weirdly enough, she has like a master's degree in marketing, and she's brilliant. And she's also a voice actress. It's kind of this other side that she does of her career. So that's
what a trip. Oh, that's really cool. See, that's what I mean. Like this network of people you kind of know and meet and bump into from various walks of life.
I was following her work, doing she doesn't do stunt work, but she was doing wire work. Actors they wear wires, and they do flips and things like that. And she does a lot of combat acting, and she does motion capture for video games. A lot of them physical actual motion capture. And I was following her work, and I was like, hey, we should meet. I reached out to her on I guess Instagram, and we ended up talking. And while we were talking, she mentioned that she had a master's degree in marketing. And I happened to be looking for somebody with a certain level of skill and knowledge in marketing when I was at Red Giant. And so it was the perfect moment. And so we just I got off the phone with her, and then I reached out to the CEO, and I was like, I think we just found the unicorn that we were looking for. Someone who understands kind of our space a little bit, who's, who has who understands the entertainment industry, but also understands the marketing. And so it was perfect.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I do want to grab another question here. So How To Junkie had two questions. I'm going to grab them both. I'm new to Unreal and run an e-commerce business. I used to design motion graphics C4D Do you know of specific cases where a product brand has used Unreal Engine in a commercial?
I think, I'm trying to think of, because we're on the, on the beta, we're seeing some stuff. I'm not sure what's real versus what people do. What I know is this, Super Bowl has used it for sure. Mm-hmm. It's definitely being, I feel like I want to say Nike, but I can't 100% say for sure it's being used in the space, in the motion design space for real with big brands. They're definitely starting to use it. I don't know offhand, people at Epic are going to be much better people to tell you that, but I've seen, I know for sure the Super Bowl, a couple of years already, they've been doing it. Mm-hmm. and a whole bunch of other stuff. And they're really pushing, part of the development of Unreal has been to develop it so that for sports especially, it's going to be very useful, because having to produce graphics around let's say you're doing a championship, having to produce graphics very quickly, Unreal is going to be able to do that better than anything else. So it's but I don't know offhand. I've just seen a few things here and there. I'm pretty sure Nike, but I can't say.
I can say for the experience from Puget Systems, I don't know about maybe specific product-based brands, mm-hmm. but I know a lot of news stages and things are all virtual production. They're especially in the sports scene.
If you're talking about if you're expanding to virtual production, then we're talking about Star Wars. We're talking about about Mandalorian and stuff like that. But if we're talking about motion design, it's a little more still new. It's still pretty new.
That's true. Yeah, And I imagine just for set dressing and things like that, it is used in a lot of commercials.
Yeah, for sure.
Instead of building out a whole set or
and if you want to see there's a company called Cart and Horse. They did something recently. I don't know, Cart and Horse, just look them up. They did a virtual production. They really break it down, and it's really cool. Like you could they show how they did it, but they transition between different time periods and different kind of worlds. And like, you know, when you look behind the scenes, you can see like where the room cuts off and where it's all fake, but it's just so perfect because of the whole integration of the camera and the environment.
It's kind of trippy how some of that's getting done. They also had a second question. Have the standalone Quixel bridge for importing assets into C4D. How efficient is this workflow compared to importing C4D models into Unreal Engine?
Okay, so time out. So it was, the question was that they're like, you're using Quixel bridge into C4D, and you're asking how hard is it to get C4D like comparatively. So models themselves are super easy to bring into Cinema 4D. There's any from Cinema 4D into Unreal. There's any number of ways you can export as an FBX or whatever. I usually once I have a whole bunch of stuff in a scene, I usually just export with Cineware. So I go to, you know, like you export it from Cinema 4D, or you save it as Cinema 4D file, and then you use Cineware, which is a plugin for Unreal Engine, and you go to import Datasmith, and you choose Cinema 4D, and it will just import the entire Cinema 4D scene right in with all the materials and everything set up. Nice. And if you want to get really specific about it, Winbush definitely has a couple of good tutorials covering that for sure. It's easy. I would say that once you start dealing with animation, it sometimes gets a little bit funky. I don't always get the result I want, but most of the time I do. You know, so but I will tell you this. I mean, you know, there's Quixel Bridge. If you're asking about Quixel Bridge for Cinema 4D, there's Quixel Bridge for Unreal Engine, which sends it right directly in there because it's made by the same company. So
hey, you know, that might be even easier.
Yeah,
that way you don't have to go from Quixel to C4D to C4D to
absolutely.
Right on.
But if you're building full scenes in Cinema 4D and then you want to bring it over to Unreal, it shouldn't be a problem.
Nice, right on. I was curious because I watched part of I think I watched all of the behind the scenes part that's underneath of the video on the School of Motion website. I'm going to post a link to that again just in case anybody missed it. The motion capture part, how challenging was that part of it?
So I should be clear. Like, I actually did do a little bit of motion capture for some of the dialogue, but I used prepackaged motion capture for a bunch of it. You know, there's so much good off the shelf stuff, and really it's the same process. I mean, like after you get to the part where you motion capture it. So like when I did some dialogue where I was talking, what I did was I used let me see what's it called. I'm trying to remember. Like I had a couple of options for tools at the time. I'm trying to just give me a sec.
Sure.
I'm trying to remember which one.
I asked because like there is a broad range of ways of doing motion capture.
Yeah,
like,
so I used Move.ai for when I was doing that. So Move.ai, and you know, nothing that comes out of any of these motion capture tools is going to be perfectly smooth. From there, I went into Cascadar. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's either Cascadar or Cascadar, and they have like tools for cleaning up the motion. Brought that into Unreal very easily. And then also, like I said, off-the-shelf stuff. There's so much good off-the-shelf motion capture, which is like, it's amazing how much good stuff there is in the Unreal Store and elsewhere. And because the tools in Unreal make it really easy now since 5.4 to quickly sort of transition your model, like to change it to retarget from one kind of skeleton to the kind of skeleton you're using, it's very easy to do. And again, I can cover that in the behind the scenes. So if you really want to get into it and spend some time with it, we do that. But it's really... It was a very smooth process. Like, and I have to say that Unreal, of all the programs I've worked with that use motion capture, Unreal has been the easiest for me. I tried in Cinema 4D, and they have great tools too. Funnily enough, the person who did the motion capture, the actual animation, physical motion for the Maxon motion capture that comes with it, is Marta Spatek, who did the voice for. She's a really experienced motion capture artist too.
That's cool. Right on. Man, I'll have to look and see if we can get somebody, because I'd love to dig a little deeper into motion capture in general and how some of that works, because it's such a broad range of ways of capturing. Yeah,
there's the suits, but I think the suits are there's definitely a value in it, right? There's definitely, I would say, more precise, and things like fingers, for example, are very hard to get through AI, but it's almost like really the cost of a suit, makes it like why, like these like online solutions, you film it with your iPhone and it turns it into a thing. Like there's a couple of companies that do that. There's, Move.ai. There's a new thing called Meshcapade. There's Wonder Dynamics. I worked with those guys for, for a little while. I was during my time consulting. It was really interesting working with the CEO, who was an animator, and then the president, who was the guy who played Wade Watts in Ready Player One. So these two guys own the company. They sold it to the company that makes 3D Studio Max. So Autodesk. So Autodesk just bought it, but like they had made this software and they were just like bootstrapped, like really like two young guys just pushing hard. And what was interesting was, working with these two guys, what I was expecting, I think that when I met them, like I thought the animator guy is going to be like totally knowledgeable. And the other guy is going to be like, he's an actor who put some money into the thing, but not at all. Like these were two guys who really knew their stuff and had a real passion for visual effects. And that software doesn't just do the motion capture. It also replaces the actor with a 3D character using AI. It removes the human, puts the character in. So it's really great, really cool stuff.
Wow. That's super cool. Oh man. I guess another sort of easier or basic question is like, what sort of advice would you give to somebody, either starting out with Unreal, since you're still pretty fresh with that, or just animation, VFX in general?
Starting out just in general is, I'm not a great artist. Let me say that. I don't feel that I'm a very great artist. There's definitely far more talented people that I have worked with over the years to know enough to know that I'm not a great designer for sure. But I always found that working hard and showing up and being enthusiastic and willing to take criticism and feedback made like the hugest difference, because people want to work with people who are excited to be there and be easy to work with and who aren't full of themselves. So no matter how talented you are, there's always going to be someone more talented. And that is not going to get you, that's only going to get you so far, really being the kind of person people want to work with.
Sure.
And that works in any situation. And it sounds stupid to say, like, it feels like it should be obvious, but, I've worked with artists who deliberately obfuscated how they were doing things. Like they would make their After Effects projects really complicated and then they'd have to get called back, but it would only work once because nobody wanted to work with them again. Right. So yeah, to me, it's about like being there for the right reasons and showing up and doing the work, and also being kind and good and getting along with people and being open to feedback and giving honest feedback. This is a piece of I always talk about this. Anytime I'm asked for advice, I'm going to tell you the harshest but most loving piece of advice I ever got, which was, shy people get nothing, and that's what they deserve. And do they deserve that? No. But do they get nothing? Very often. And we're in a field as artists where we have to put ourselves out there. It's what we do. And I always kind of compare it to like, hey, if you're in a bar and you're trying to, pick someone up, you're hitting on them, and they say no, they're not interested. That rejection is way below the kind of rejection you feel as an artist, because that rejection is like, they just saw you, you're not their type, whatever it is, right? You don't know what's going on in their head. When you share your art with somebody, the pain of having them tell you it's not good is so much deeper in the core that you have to learn, you have to get calluses on that. And
Sure.
and the other thing is that like the honesty, being honest with people and giving feedback is super important, but you can't just give it. You have to build a rapport with people to do that as well. I was talking to John Knoll. He's the chief creative officer at Industrial Light and Magic, and we talked about this, about shyness and all of that. And he said, as a person giving feedback, like it's hard. You don't want to hurt people's feelings, but everyone wants to do their best work, and the only way they're going to do that is if you are honest with them and give them the feedback they need to hear. So I always come back to that as a piece of advice for artists as a whole, which is, just be willing to accept that feedback, but also put yourself out there and be ready to be rejected. It's just part of the process.
Sure.
It'll only make you better if you listen to that feedback. And obviously, look, someone's not going to like everything that's out there. So you may get one piece of feedback from somebody that says it's terrible, and other people will tell you that it's great. And you have to know where to listen. If it's your mom telling you it's great, but it's your producer telling you it's not good, it's probably your producer that's right.
Sure.
But you don't have to listen to every voice in the world, and you have to find people that you trust and are willing to get that feedback from as well.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. Yeah, I think that's good across the board too. Just no matter what you're doing, that's good advice. Yeah. You'd mentioned earlier about how sometimes you get a job and you have to do work that maybe isn't necessarily personally fulfilling. So how important is it to work on like side project, passion projects? Because I imagine this short film was, I mean, tangentially related to what you do day to day, but it's also a little outside of that.
This was, I did this on my nights and weekends. It took me about 6 weeks, nights and weekends to do. My wife was very kind. She, like whenever I get into one of these places where I'm doing a thing, I did another short film before that in Cinema 4D called Star Wars: The Woodcut, and that was also roughly the same kind of timeline. That's what keeps you going. Like, don't get me wrong. I love what I do at School of Motion, but I don't get to work on a ton of creative stuff. I do like to learn a lot. So for me, learning is very tactile, right? Like not necessarily physically tactile, but I need to be doing stuff to learn. Like watching a video is one thing, but putting it into practice is another. And so almost every one of these personal projects I've done have come from me wanting to learn something and get better at it. So for me, like I dove into Unreal, I started making sense out of it, but I was like, how much do I really know? And the only way to find out, and the only way to really push that is to actually make something that has a beginning and an end that I'm going to show to people. And better yet, even if I learn stuff in the process, can I share that knowledge with them? And so that's what that was. So that 6 weeks of making that short film, the beginning part of it, I would say the first half of it is a lot of trial and error. And then the last half of it was just now that I know what was working and what wasn't working was still a lot of trial and error, but still like much faster, like sure. Things still didn't work necessarily the way I expected them to, but they just didn't work faster so that I could move on to the things that worked.
Yeah. Oh, that's important. I think, failing forward or I don't like failing, because to me that's like an end point almost.
Right.
But being able to make those mistakes and correct quickly and change from that.
And also, by the way, look, I could have massaged this thing to death. Like, I know that it's not perfect, and there's spots in there that I'm like, it could be better. I know that I mostly me see them based on the feedback I gotten. But like, every once in a while someone says something where I was like, I should have changed that. I knew it was bugging me at the time. And you just have to at some point be able to let go of your work, right? Sure. Like, especially when you're not being paid for it, you could spend forever doing it. But if you're going to be the harshest critic of your own work, and eventually you got to put it out there, right? So for me, this was like, I could spend a little more time making it better, or I could, I've reached a point where I feel like I got to where I wanted it to be. I can breathe and put it out there. And if people like it, great. If not, I made this for me. So that's it.
No. Did you have like a hard line in the sand? Like, okay, I'm only going to spend this much time on this and that's it? Or...
No, I mean, I basically said, like, I had the script and I was like, I'm just going to do this. And then when I get to the point where I don't hate it, I'm going to, put it out there. And so it's funny because I go through this part of, like, and a lot of artists do, where you start something and you love it and then you hate it, right? Like, even like sure. You hate it. And then when it's kind of like you get to the end, you take so basically you think you're like, this is it. This is where it's going to be. Take a break, and if you come back to it a couple of days later and you still don't hate it anymore, right? Like you're looking at it, you're like, oh, it's actually not bad. Like I feel like I did a lot. Then I'm like, okay, this is ready to go. Like I could sit and fix and make little things, but I think I did a good job. And what I'll say is the place where it's funny, I did, this is very unusual for me. And I think, like, I don't think most people work this way, but I did the audio, the VO last, like almost everything. Like I blocked it out in my head timing wise, but I did not have audio to work with. It's a little dangerous because you never know if you're going to end up needing more time. The one plus not the one, but the many pluses of Unreal, one of them was that if I needed to extend a piece or shift the animation over, the amount of time it took to render out a scene or a shot was so little that I could make these little changes. So like I didn't feel like I was working without a net. Like I know that if I was doing something in Cinema 4D and discovered that like this photoreal thing I was trying to do wasn't good and I need to retime it, that could be like a day or two of rendering to try to get it back to like try to fix that problem. This was like, a couple of minutes, right? And so I think the hardest, the most intense scene I had, which was like most intense shot was like maybe 17 seconds, and it took 40 minutes to render in Unreal, and that's because I rendered it with like high quality, like multi-sampling the frames, like up to 32 or even 128 frames per every frame, so it blends them and makes them really clean. Ooh. So that's why like if you're making video games, you're willing to sacrifice the quality like for that speed. But if you're making a short film or you're making cinematics, you can't necessarily do that. Like, or you don't want to, and you don't have to. And that's really more of it. It's more that for someone approaching Unreal and looking at it and saying, oh well, video games are fine, but they drop frames every once in a while, and and the quality is maybe not as amazing as like I would like it to look, that's only the version that's in real time. There's other renderers. There's the path tracer, which is a lot more like Redshift, and then there's just even in the real time stuff that you're using, the regular renderer, there's the ability to like multi-sample the frames so that you can get the best quality on each frame. So it's but the point is that even though some of the stuff took like 40 minutes to render, like that was the hardest thing to render. Like I could come back, like I go out, get lunch, and come back an hour later, and I was ready to just fix up that scene. So I recorded all the audio. First I recorded my own scratch track, and then I added in the audio. Then I reached out to the actors and said, hey, I've got this, take a listen. What do you think? And they're on board.
Oh, that's cool. I guess I want to touch on your hardware a little bit as well, since you get it from us.
Yeah.
I guess, was there any particular part of the process that you think would have held you back if not for the robust hardware that you have?
So let's talk about the hardware for a moment. And
Sure.
and I wanted to say this, like, for clarity for anyone watching, no, I got nothing from Puget for free. 3 years ago, after I left Maxon, I was still on a Mac, and I wanted to do more 3D. And I knew that I had been sacrificing for speed and power on a Mac, but Macintosh is like, they got two things going for them, which is all parts come from one company. And you call a phone, and the people at Apple are very happy to help you. And then, they make you feel like they really care, right? They have a whole script. They go, oh, that does sound frustrating, and then like they help you out. And it's great. Like, no, I love Macs, and they're great, but they're not great for 3D, for sure not. Like, they're not, you can do it, but like the comparison is like, if you've never used a PC, if you're on a Mac and you've never used Windows, like, you don't even know. And if you've gone from Windows and you try doing it on a Mac, you're like, right, I forgot how much it feels like I'm slogging through water. Right. So 3 years ago, when I made that transition, I reached out to people and I said, hey, what company makes a good computer for Windows? And I was like, I don't really like, the hardware is almost tangential, because like Dell makes good hardware too. Like, that's not it. But my experience has been that the minute I start putting parts in a computer that don't come from one company, or even if you do, they all start arguing like, oh no, it's that guy's problem. His thing's not interfacing with your thing, right? And all that. So it's like, where do I go that I can get a computer where the people who make it will actually understand what it is I'm doing every day? Because I really, literally, like 15 years ago, I called Unreal. I called Dell, and I was like, hey, I'm having a problem with Maya. And they're like, who's Maya? Right. And I'm like, okay, I give up. Right. And so when I call Puget, I'm like, hey, I'm having some really strange issues when I'm running Unreal and something's crashing. I don't know what's going on. They understand my workflow. They understand what I'm doing. They come on, they share the screen with me. They look at like what's going on. Oh, it's a peripheral that's interacting, that's causing Unreal, whatever it is. There's all this stuff. They understand it. And sure, like working in Windows, Microsoft does not make it easy to do, but I wanted to work with a company that would understand what I was doing and would be there for me. And that has absolutely been the case. Every time I needed help, they'd help me with some of the strangest things that were just completely like edge cases, because I do a lot of weird stuff. I do music, I do animation, visual effects, 3D, audio. I do some voice work and stuff. So like all of it is like all over the place, and all the kinds of tech I have coming in here, and they've been great. So what it came to though is, when I bought it, I was like, okay, look, I'm going to be using this computer for the next years. Just like this chair that I'm sitting in, I was like, okay, I'm going to sit and put my butt in this thing every day, for who knows how long. Like, I'm going to put money into it, right? I don't necessarily have like unlimited resources, but if I think about it over the years, how often was I changing computers? I want something that's going to last a long time. And this was 3 years ago, and I think I paid $6,500, right? It's not a cheap price, but on the other hand, I got real power, 128 gigs of RAM, 2 really large hard drives, 3090, which at the time, an RTX 3090, which at the time was the top of the line, NVIDIA card. And that, like, I would say that all of that, the space, the RAM, and especially that card, made it easy to navigate around these large worlds. And if you look at the scene that you're seeing in my film, this kind of the setting for it, that is a very large world, and you're seeing only a piece of it. But the set that I use is from an artist named Vasily Poryagin, who sells his stuff in the Unreal Marketplace, and he builds these very rich giants, like physically, like you look at it, it's incredible what goes into this stuff. And And like my story takes place in a very small corner of that, but I was able to like jump around the environment and set things up. Like when the little drone is, when David Hewlett is flying through the thing, and like you're seeing that world and have that monster, that comes out at him, like all of that. That's a lot of overhead. And I was watching that in real time. And maybe that wasn't the final quality of the render, but that is not a thing I would ever be able to do anywhere else. Right. So, but that's because, it's a video game engine that is designed to work with cards like the 3090, which are meant for, for this kind of graphic acceleration. And so, for me, this was like, without this computer, I could not have done that. I would never be able to do it on a Mac for sure. And probably most PCs, I'd run into troubles and I'd call and be like, who's Unreal? That's,
Yeah, I love hearing those kinds of stories too. Cause, it a lot of times we get feedback about the cost part, and it's hard to get across that you're saving a lot of time. What was your time worth?
Look, if you're a professional artist, this is the thing. I understand when hobbyists, they don't like it. I'm like, I wish I could help you, but if you're a hobbyist, like then you're gonna have to just spend less money, and that's just the nature of being a hobbyist. But if you are a professional doing this work, you don't just want a computer that's good. You want a company that's going to be behind it. And look, like I said, I've had the strangest things. And I probably your tech support team does not want me telling people this, but you guys help me get my printer up and running on this computer. I have an older printer, and they actually that is not a thing that you guys should be doing, but they took it as seriously as anything else I've had. And they helped me. They got onto my computer. They looked at what was going on. They removed drivers. They put drivers in. And it was great. And at no point did anyone say, "Oh, listen, I have 3 other customers I got to help." Like my problem was the most important problem, and they stayed on the phone with me an hour and a half to try to find stupid problems that are caused by Microsoft, things that don't interact well, and getting it done. And it's always like some kind of peripheral that you buy a hard drive from one company, and like it's not. But the end of the day, this thing has been so reliable, and I have a 3D laptop before you guys were making laptops. I hate it, and I use it to it must feel really bad because I use it to call into to remote into my desktop instead of doing everything on it itself. Right? Like I can't do it. It's painful. So
that's good. Yeah. And I love that you point out that we even helped with the printer thing, because that highlights the sort of the corporate philosophy, I guess. Mm-hmm. It's our job. Like you have your job, you have your expertise. Yeah. Your job is to do animation and VFX and this Unreal stuff, and it's our job to handle the tech part. It's our job to keep you doing what you do best. Yeah, and whether that's obviously the printer thing was holding you back from doing what you needed to do, and so that's our job to help with that. And I think that's important to highlight. I mean, I just the computer.
As an artist, or even someone who leads a marketing team at School of Motion, like I don't want to spend my time dealing with computer problems. Like I just don't. No. Like it's not like I used to do it. And of course there's some things you're gonna have to do, but yeah, like that's the whole point of spending the money and getting a piece of reliable technology and going with a company that is there for you is to not have to have that be my worry today.
Yeah, that's so important to get across, because it's so much more than just the parts in the box. It's about helping you to get your work done in a minimal of fuss.
So, hopefully I enjoy the conversation. I'm not gonna lie. Like one of the guys told me he's like doing DJ work, and I'm like, hey, Unreal has this whole like DMX lighting system thing that you can use if you're doing a DJ. Like he's like, really? And like then we nerd out about the stuff that isn't even like we're not like I forget we're on a tech call. So. Yeah. All right. Well, I don't want to keep turning this into a commercial. I can talk about this all day, but I just, I feel people should know that I love this computer. It's the best experience I've ever had on a Windows machine, hands down. I love it.
I'll make sure the team hears about it, because it's. I feel like maybe sometimes support gets raw end of the stick sometimes, because we're always they're the ones who have to deal with people having a bad day. And so it's nice to hear, and I'll make sure that they hear what good job they're doing. That's so cool. So I'm curious about the future for you. We only about 10 more minutes or 10 minutes or so left in this, and so you've made this cool short film in Unreal. Is there going to be more stuff you're going to be doing in Unreal?
I mean, I have a couple of things I want to do. Like I definitely have some stories I want to tell. Right now I'm like I I think it's always good for me to take a little bit of a break once I do a project that really has me intensely in there. It's, during the time that I'm doing it, I'm a very different person. The way I think is very different. I made software at Red Giant. Part of I was the head of marketing there, but I also designed a couple of pieces of software that are very popular, Holomatrix and Glitch, which are used. I see it all over the place. And I remember that when I was doing that, when I was making those products, I was working with a guy named Dan Eberts, and I'm not really a coder, but I had to learn a little bit of coding for it. And I just for the few months that I was really focused on it, my head was in a coding space, I had dreams about coding actually, where I would get up and I'd be angry that I didn't, but I was oh, I have to do all the work again now. Cause I did it last night, but I didn't save it. You know what I mean? That was in my brain, it was in my sleep. So I need time off from that. I try to do little creative things too, but I do have some stories I want to tell for sure. Definitely more stuff in Unreal. I really want to get a little more into some of the aspects of Unreal, like cloth dynamics. And I also personally, I want to learn a little bit more about motion capture of facial motion capture and the tools that are there for having characters speak and whatnot, and see what I can do with that.
Right on. You know about Gabby K, right? Feeding Wolves, I think is her social handles. She's done a lot of work, especially in the facial motion capture stuff. I can send you her social media links and stuff. You may have bumped into her a little bit or have noticed it in terms of Windbush and stuff as well. The community is very tight knit, so you may recognize some of it, just not the name. So that's cool. I'm curious to. I always like to get a perspective of the industry in as it is and where you think it's heading.
Yeah. So I think that, I love Cinema 4D, but I do think that there's going to be a big shift into Unreal. Not entirely. You can't model, so you're always going to need a program like Cinema 4D. But the amount of time that it takes to render out of Cinema 4D to get a result, with Unreal kind of really putting themselves in to compete, I think there's going to be a lot more people, if not replacing Cinema 4D, they're going to be adding Unreal into their mix for sure. Okay. And I think, and it's really cool because again, the people at Unreal are trying to create tools for people who make motion design, do motion design, who make motion graphics. There's that. We could talk about AI. I was going to ask. It's such a it's a 2-level conversation. What are the laws going to do versus what's going to be possible in the meantime until the laws crack down on it? There was this whole thing with was it Lionsgate that just gave that sold their library to Runway to use as a training?
Something like that. I heard.
Yeah. And so to me, I'm really, that's going to get that is going to be interesting because basically they're giving them feature films to train on. But those feature films star actors, and that means those actors are going to be using the training material. And I doubt those actors have signed off on having an AI, do it. So that's going to definitely, I think, create a lot more discussion around what's legal and not. Mm-hmm. But I am watching AI come, and it's not going anywhere, right? I don't think it's disappearing. Joey is of the opinion that we may be hitting the bubble before we pop, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's not that the tech can't do it; it's that the cost of the tech is outweighing the revenue from the tech to the point where we're going to run out of money to continue that expansion. So I think that there will be a pop, and then a few companies will be very successful at it, and most will disappear. But I do think, unlike 3D, there was 3D TV and there was VR, which for a long, everyone was oh, this is the big thing. That they weren't the big thing, and no one thought they were the big thing. Just like the metaverse, that's not a thing either, right? I never felt like any of those things were going to be real things. This I'm there's the bottle's been uncorked. This is a real thing that is going to be sticking around, and I'm actually in some ways grateful for it because there are tools like Move.ai which replace work that I would never do that work, right? Rotoscoping, for example, is something I want to see a great solution for AI. There's a couple of companies who offer it, and to me, listen, it's not that I'm taking the work away from somewhere else. I'm never going to tell those stories. I'm never going to tell those stories unless I have tools that can help me with that. So it's not that I'm not a big budget guy who's going to pay for artists all over the world to make something. I just want to tell some stories. And AI, if used ethically and properly, can help me as an artist to do it. So I want to be clear, I don't like the use of people's work to do it, but I do think that motion capture or rotoscoping and these kinds of very painful, slow tasks that can be replaced that aren't artistic, that are entirely physical labor. Like these are things that I really want to have replaced so that I can, tell stories and do that.
Yeah, I agree. There was a lot when you mentioned like rotoscoping. Rotobrush 2 came out with, I think it was in After Effects.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of talk about, oh man, it's going to steal jobs. People are going to, and I feel like yes, unfortunately that does happen. But I feel like it frees up more time to do other things.
Well, look, I think like it's always like this. The high-end studios, the ones that are doing this stuff, they're not going to lose the work. It's going to be people who don't have who have a very particular skill, and it sucks. Like I don't want that to be a thing that an artist ever loses their work, But on the other hand, it's again like what I said. A lot of it is like we were just not going to do this kind of thing, but now that we can do it without having to like send it overseas, which costs money, like we can do this easily in a few minutes instead of having a whole project where we go overseas to have rotoscoping, which is a thing you do. Like that's a good solution. And the truth is that Rotobrush isn't fully there, and neither are any of the other AI tools are not fully there. You still need to do a lot of cleanup. And I think that for really high-end quality work, you're going to want to work with somebody who does it by hand and does it really well. And that may not be forever, for sure not. But, but for me, who needs to like have a guy walk in front of a dinosaur behind him for a funny video I want to make, and I want to just get the Rotobrush around my head so the dinosaur is behind me. Like I was never going to send that to China to have people rotoscope that, or India, or wherever. Like many of these companies are offshore in other countries where they pay them very little. And so this is like I was never going to do that. I was either going to do it myself or I wasn't going to do it at all, and that's where we ended up.
Yeah, often equate it to furniture, like IKEA, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fine, it's easy. You put it together yourself, and it works.
You find it easy to put IKEA together? I find it's like.
Oh, I mean, I used to build PCs for Puget Systems. Yeah, IKEA furniture, no problem. But then there's still people who hand turn, wood and will do that, bespoke sort of thing. And there are going to, like you said, there's going to be people out there who still appreciate the hands-on creativity. It does open the door for a lot of schlock, I guess, some very low effort stuff that might drown out some of the more creative work. But I think the people who are interested in one or the other are going to be able to find what they're looking for, and there's always going to be a space for the human touch.
The biggest problem, as we kind of come to a close, is I think that there are people at the studios who don't appreciate the amount of work that goes into ours, and they think an AI can do this stuff, and they try to like lowball the pricing and saying like, yeah, we're just going to use AI. And I think that they're also trying to get away with again using stuff that's maybe not really licensed. These are the problems they're having. That is again, that's a whole other problem. But generally speaking, as an artist, like I have a friend who does woodwork, and he puts a lot of time and effort into it, and he gets people buying his stuff, and they buy it because they want something original and something beautiful and something that he spent time on. And then like you say, you go to IKEA or you can go to some store and buy like a little wooden table, and that's fine. It's just that if you want something for your home that looks nice, like you're going to go to this guy. So it's true, very much.
Yeah, and I think it's important to focus more on that. I mean, like you said, the ethics part is very important as well.
I do my best to it's so tempting sometimes to be able to like use some of this stuff. I do my best not to. Adobe, it's funny because if you look at like what Adobe has, like their AI is more or less. I mean, we could argue about like some of their philosophy on it, but is ethically trained on their library of stuff. It's only trained. So like if you say to Grok, right, you're like, make a picture of Spider-Man. It's like, boom, you got a picture of Spider-Man. Yeah. I always joke about this. You ask Adobe's AI and it's like, I've never seen Spider-Man, but I was in a bar drunk once and the guy described it. And then you get something that looks like nothing like Spider-Man, but like other than like if somebody drew it during like, playing a game and you have to describe a character, like, one of those games where you draw, like I'm trying to think of like Pictionary or something.
Yeah.
Like it does the Pictionary version of it, but it does a lot of good stuff too. It's just, you can't use like IP. And so, with Grok, I've tested it. It's like, it's pretty criminal how much they have taken what's out there and scraped it,
Yeah. Well, I mean, that brings us pretty much to our hour. So is there anything else you want to mention or shout out or anything like that?
No, I mean, I will say this. If you want to learn Unreal Engine, I learned it at School of Motion. It's a 6-hour course with Jonathan Winbush. Do it at your own pace. I highly recommend it. It's called Unreal for 3D Artists. And if you want to learn After Effects, again, we've got a lot of great courses at School of Motion as well. And, you know, I like I said, I've worked in a lot of places. I came to School of Motion because it's what I love. I love sharing knowledge and doing that. Even though I'm not one of the teachers there, I do make tutorials and stuff that are free that I put out there. If you're trying to grow your skills and you want to learn more so that you can grow your career, it's a great place because it's not just like tutorials. It's actually artists that will work with you and check your homework and give you feedback and help you get better at your work. And that is the thing that I love that. I love that about the school.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. This was a lot of fun. I was really enjoyed talking with you today. That was really cool. I also like to thank the audience for joining us today as well. Like I said, if you want to see School of Motion, I post a link there in the chat, and I'll update the description on YouTube and stuff with links to the short film and the course that you took for Wimbush and all that stuff as well. And then my general outro. We do this every month, the first Tuesday of the month, though we might be doing a little different format. I'm still playing around with live or pre-recorded and things like that. But so mark your calendars, though, first Tuesday of the month. I don't think we have a topic for next month yet. So stay tuned for that. And thanks, everybody, and we'll see y'all next time.
Thanks for having me.